Good evening and welcome to Inside Government, a show produced for the spring 2022 semester here at CU Community College. This is a show that's broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, as well as the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have in our studio tonight the new police chief for the city of Auburn, James Slayton, who took over the 65-member department back in July, replacing Sean Butler, who decided to retire. Joining the Auburn Police Department in 1998, Chief Slayton has had a busy 8 months on the job, with the department cracking down on the untaxed cigarettes and illegal marijuana sales, to taking on neighborhood nuisances, as well as having a group of new recruits join the force after a wave of 20-year retirements over the last year because of incentives built into the system. We've asked the chief to come in to discuss all of that, but between our invitation to him and today, there was an arrest of a school resource officer, William Morrissey, who's a member of the Auburn Police Department, for an inappropriate relationship with a 14-year-old girl. We will talk to the chief initially about that, but what we really want to concentrate on the items that he has taken over as the new chief. Welcome back to Inside Government, and congratulations. The last time you were here, you were not chief. So welcome back, and congratulations on your new job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Guy.
So the in the last couple of days, and we're only going to touch on this a little bit, but there are some accusations that have been made against Officer Morrissey, who's a school resource officer at Auburn High School. How did they come to your attention?
So on Monday, February 28th, I received an anonymous letter in the mail that said confidential. When I opened that letter later on in the day, there was some disturbing information in that regarding SRO Morrissey. I immediately contacted the deputy chief and realized also that the city manager just received that same.
So two anonymous letters, same letters to both of you.
Correct.
And then what steps did you take first? Because I know then at some point you did bring in the sheriff's department for obvious reasons, but what steps did you take with Chief Anthony?
So first of all, I obviously take something like that very serious. Some allegations made against an officer. So the deputy chief and I formulated a plan. City manager was on board. That next morning, we took Officer Morrissey out of the school, had one of our officers get a hold of the victim, secure her to make sure there was no contact after that point.
When you say removed him from the office, just told him do not show up, or did somebody go there and physically say leave the building?
Yes, we had him come to the station.
Oh, yeah.
So
okay.
we could initially talk to him there.
So then you referred this to the CU County Sheriff's Department for what I would consider obvious reasons. You don't want to be doing something internally that, from the public's perception, might look like it's an inside job.
Right. So we talk all the time about transparency, and that's where that comes into play. We still have to do an internal investigation, but once we determine that there may be some criminal activity involved, we turn that over to another agency, take our hands right off of that.
So from the criminal perspective, that's the Sheriff's Department, the District Attorney's Office. From the internal perspective, that's APD. You're looking in-house.
Correct.
And do you have an SRO now at the high school? Because obviously you have an agreement with the district.
Yes, to fulfill a contract, if someone's going to be out more than 5 days, we have to fill that position. So what we did was got together with the SRO supervisor. She had a list of people that had been interested in the past. We started talking to those individuals, and we put Sarah Howard in the school starting this Monday.
How many SROs do you have, by the way?
We have 3 full-time SROs and 4. Something new this year we have is SPOs, Special Patrol Officers, that help out in the elementary schools.
Okay.
So they're former police officers, but they only work part-time.
So 2 full-timers at the high school, 1 at the junior high?
No, 1 at the high school, 1 in the elementary, and 1 in the middle school.
And then these patrols
and then the 4
fill in.
Correct.
And how does somebody become an SRO?
So initially you put a letter of interest in. Every year we ask whoever's interested in being a school resource
So
officer,
they're not assigned?
submit. No. We don't have to just pick somebody and assign them to that role because they may not be a good fit for the school. It's got to be somebody that wants to be in there and work with children.
And is Mr. Morrissey on paid leave now? Because obviously he has both employee rights and legal rights. Is he on paid leave at this stage?
At this particular time, he is on unpaid leave. administrative leave.
And you've been around long enough, 22 years, going on 24 years. What has he been charged with right now?
Right now he's been charged with criminal sex abuse first, official misconduct, and endangering the welfare.
And in these types of cases, it's not unusual for additional charges as an investigation progresses to occur?
If the Sheriff's Department deems that necessary, yes, they will.
I'm just saying in a generic.
Yes.
Once that can of worms is opened, it usually.
Yes, because we were initially working off an anonymous letter.
So there may be additional. You would not be surprised if there's.
It happens.
Okay. My last question on this, and I want to move on. How is the victim?
I have not had any contact with the victim. One thing that we did make sure, as well as the Sheriff's Department did, is that she had the services she needs, some victim specialist services and stuff like that, because we want to make sure we protect the victim in cases like this.
So other than this particular item, this particular issue, you've been on the job for 8 months. Any big surprises?
Free time has gone away.
So I was talking to one member of council the other day, and they said to me that your predecessor was always at council, but you have taken advantage of continually updating council. Why are you doing that?
I feel that's very important. I have a boss. We all have bosses. City manager is mine, and I update him and the council whenever something happens, so they don't find out from someone else. I think that's important.
So a lot of your contemporaries, though you would have been older than some of these contemporaries, but a lot of your contemporaries retired in the last year at 20 years, 21 years. Why didn't you?
I wasn't ready. They say you'll know when you're ready to go. I'm just not ready yet. I still enjoy going to work every day.
So why did you want to become chief?
Sean Butler. No, administrative lieutenant in charge of planning and training. And that kind of gave me a lot of insight of what happens, I'll use the term down the hall, in the administrative level. And it was just timing. It was right. It felt right.
But you also had to make a commitment to this. You had to move into the city of Auburn, which you were not required to in your previous position. But you and your wife have moved into the city of Auburn, which means leaving a house that you had had for decades.
Correct. But I knew in the test, so it wasn't, because we have to take a test to move up in this position. So I knew it when I took the test. That was one of the requirements.
The question is, did you tell your wife when you took the test?
I did. Guy, I've been married long enough, 33 years. This is a mutual decision.
Mutual. So I want to talk about, so the original reason we wanted to have you come on because of two different items that have occurred in the last month. One, or more than a month, but the nuisance law, and also you did a raid on a smoke shop, most likely, maybe not me, but 7 golf swings away from here, down the street on Franklin Street. So let's talk about the nuisance. We have a nuisance law and a new nuisance abatement board, correct?
Correct.
So what does the board do?
So first of all, that's another thing. Sean Butler went to one meeting and then tasked me with that afterwards, so I'd like to thank him. But with the nuisance abatement board is we take complaints on nuisance within the city. So it's fire calls, police calls, and code calls. So we take all that information, we gather it from each department, and we determine whether or not this particular property, it could be a residential home or a business, has become a nuisance.
So it can be a house or a business. And so are the laws in the nuisance abatement board, are they relatively new though?
No, these laws have been on the books for a while, but the city manager had gone back through and realized this is an opportunity for us now to bring that back forward.
But I think I read in one news story in the Citizen, you've been on the department since 1998, never had done this before.
No, we haven't, but they were on the books. We didn't create these laws. They were there. We're just now starting to utilize them.
And in your view, and the department's view, and the city's view, what do you consider not what somebody tells you is a nuisance property. What do you consider a nuisance property?
So I look at the tough part. You're going to have neighbor problems. Not everybody's going to get along. You're going to have parking problems. It's that consistent thing that creates an issue for the whole neighborhood. Might not be just the person next door, though they can make a complaint. It's what it's done to the neighborhood.
So the first house that you boarded up, and there's a great photo essay that ran in the Citizen back, I think it was in December, was a house where a murder occurred in 2019. In our old home, because you and I are both that area of grew up around there, Delavan Street. So you boarded up or took over the property back in December, correct?
Correct.
So what does a shutdown entail? Because in the Citizen, they do have the order, believe it or not, that 6 months before, from July 23rd of 2021, from Judge Fandrick, who's now since retired. But that started some time before, correct?
So that started the process. There's a couple different ways that we've been doing it. That was the initial way that we did it. Went through, got an injunction, gave them an opportunity to rectify the problem, and they were not. It continued to be a problem.
And the owner, it sounds like, I thought I read one story, had not attended any of these hearings, just chose not to respond.
And that happens lately. There's been more and more property owners attending. There's been more attorneys
because once you
attending
take
with
over
them.
the first one, they now know you're serious.
Correct.
So there were, was it 11 people living at that house at the time on December 14th? What happens to them?
So the homeowner was in that house at the time that we did that. So one thing that we did is we made sure we had services available.
Nick's Ride was there.
Because we have people with addiction. We were putting people on the street. We wanted to make sure we had Department of Social Services there, so they could house them. Any resource that they needed, we felt it was important to have there that day for them.
So when you seize a property, what does that mean? What do you do?
So the codes department will come in, board up the property, and in this particular case, I believe that it's up to a year, and they have a right to, once again, rectify all the issues.
So they can get the property back.
Yes.
But they have to go through certain steps. And you've done a second property since December.
We did a property on Morris Street.
And for those, Delavan is much easier for people to get their heads around because there was a murder there. What were the issues at Morris Street?
So some of the issues were with some of the same people from Delavan Street had moved into Morris Street. Okay. Neighbors complaining, drug activity in the area. So we would have officers around. They saw stuff. It got to be a neighborhood problem.
So do most of these cases revolve around drugs and abuse?
A lot of these particular cases did. Not all of them are about drug use.
Do you expect this to be a normal process for the department now? Are there other properties on your radar?
Yes, we meet every month, and we go through the properties, and we go back through the old properties that we had on there to see where they fall in. And maybe I was skeptical at the beginning, not knowing what this was going to do, but I've seen the turnaround this has done for neighborhoods. There's houses on Grover that just, they are cleaning them up. They're siding. They're taking care of the garbage now.
Because they know they're at risk.
Correct.
Those investments are at risk.
They're at risk of losing their rent and stuff like that.
So who's on the abatement board?
It's myself, City Manager Jeff Diger, and City Fire Chief Fritz.
Okay, so it's not private citizens. This is internal.
Correct.
To the city. So the other item was roughly a month ago. You, members of the Auburn Police Department and the Finger Lakes Drug Task Force, raided a smoke shop on Franklin Street over by Tinker's. Why did you do the raid? So
once again, complaints that kept coming into my office. Complaints from neighboring stores, businesses. I drive home that way every day. I could see the traffic. It wasn't normal traffic for somebody just selling certain products. So
was it a gathering place as well?
No, not so much in the store, but around the neighborhood. You have a burned area, you have a convenience store there, a bus stop, Chapel House is on one corner, so there was always people around. So that wasn't the issue. The nuisance part of it didn't come into play because there were people hanging around, but it contributed to.
So I'm assuming you seized 118,000 items. So I'm assuming the majority of those are cigarettes?
It was over 10,000 of untaxed cigarettes.
Okay.
And you know, I took kind of heat for that because people were saying, oh, it's only cigarettes, it's this, that. But I look at it as a building 2 doors down. They're paying taxes on their cigarettes. This particular place was not.
So I want to ask you about the cigarettes because, first of all, untaxed is untaxed and it's illegal. So let's cut to the chase on that one. So you did 10,000 cigarettes. So are those? How do you tell the difference between a taxed cigarette and an untaxed? Are they tax stamps? Or is it packaging?
Correct. There's a stamp on them.
So these are not loose. There's not a drawer where there's 10,000. You know, give me 15 cigarettes. These are packs,
cartons, just like you would buy in a store yourself.
So are they from out of state or out of the country?
That I don't know where they came from.
Okay. Because that process is still going through.
Correct. There's charges pending on the untaxed cigarettes, the cannabis that was found in there. There was hemp. And then doing some research myself and working with detectives, our Narcotics Bureau, and New York State Taxation and Finance. Flavored vapes are illegal to sell in there. You can only have tobacco flavored. All the other flavors are illegal.
So let's take these in pieces. So first of all, our smoke shops, it sounds like, are licensed.
Smoke shops are to sell certain products.
So they're licensed to sell certain products. Who licensed them?
New York State.
And I thought I read one story that about 5 of them that have popped up in the last 2 or 3 years. 3 in the city, 2 just on the outskirts.
Correct.
Roughly.
Now we have 4 in the city. 1 more maybe opening up, and 1 out by Chili's in that plaza, and another one going out there.
So how hard is it to? And I know this is not your job, but I just was wondering if you knew that from a process point. How hard is it to revoke a license?
That's why we're working with New York State. New York State can do that. We cannot. The issue becomes, just because cannabis became legal, you still have to have a license to sell that and dispense it. These smoke shops are not licensed to do that.
All right, we're not there yet because I want to ask the two other questions about this particular smoke shop. Is this smoke shop still open?
It is.
Okay. Is anybody charged with a crime?
Not at this time.
Okay, but that still could occur.
That's pending.
So they could be facing civil penalties in many cases, or fines.
Correct.
Okay. So let's jump to the marijuana because I want to take marijuana and then I want to go to vapes because they all have different nuances to it. So you also seized marijuana, correct?
Correct.
Now, what form was that in?
They were in jars. They were selling it from behind the counter.
Okay. So while marijuana is legalized in New York, it is not for sale yet. Am I okay? It is on Native American reservations. I think Sheriff Skank was here last week. Lakeside, I'm not giving them an advertisement, but Lakeside, they have different rules and regulations when it comes to that compared to legalized marijuana in non-Native American settings, correct?
Correct.
So where is the whole process? I know there was a New York Conference of Mayors last month. Many of the people at that meeting in Albany were chomping at the bit that the state dumped this new law on there and they don't have the infrastructure in place to deal with it, which sounds to be a common theme of everyone.
My understanding now is they've comprised their board.
Okay.
So they now have a board that will oversee the marijuana laws.
So will you have to have a license to dispense?
You will.
Okay.
So there's
who will issue that? The state?
The state. And
Okay.
there can only be so many licenses within one area. And that's the state to determine how many can be in the city of Auburn. How many can be.
So could that be that you have 4 smoke shops? Is it 4 right now, you think, in the city?
Yes.
What happens if there's only 3 allowed?
Well, we're talking 2 different things here. Smoke shops can pop up all over. That doesn't give them a license to sell marijuana.
Many of those owners have said they want to sell.
Correct, but the state determines
Okay.
who can sell and who they give the licenses to.
So do you worry about a black market still with marijuana?
Most definitely.
Still going to be an issue?
Because we see that now with other drugs. And that lies the issue. It's the cannabis and other drugs that are out there that aren't licensed, aren't regulated, and we don't know what they're putting in them and what they're doing to people. So that's our concern.
And do you have any idea of the timeline the state's saying before you'll be able to go into a store and buy something?
I don't.
I want to ask about vapes because I think that's a different issue to a certain degree, especially because it involves children. So you see flavor vapes. Was this vaping items, vaping equipment, or flavored?
Both.
Okay.
It was they were separated. You had a nicotine cigarette, the vape separate.
So these are something that flavors have been illegal for what, a year or 2 years now?
Flavors are illegal.
Illegal.
Yes.
No, that's what I'm saying. But they're illegal, but only in the last couple of years.
Yes, they came out with that. The state came out with that because what I've read and researched is the children were coming in and buying the flavored vapes and
that leads to other nicotine products.
Yes.
And so that's the worry.
Yes.
So I know Onondaga County, there was a story, I think on WSYR, they had a crackdown maybe 3 or 4 months ago with their law enforcement. I don't know which agencies to crack down. Are flavored vapes more common than we think they are?
Yes, we took quite a few out of that store.
And I'm assuming anytime you're aware of a store doing that, you will raid that store.
Correct.
So do you do this like beer sales where you might send somebody in who's underage? In this case, it doesn't matter if they're underage or not. If it's a flavored vape, it's illegal. How do you gather evidence on that, not giving trade secrets away?
So that's what the Q County Health Department does.
Okay.
They will do such things as that.
Just like a beer sale.
Correct. That's the problem is with ABC law, we have certain regulations and we can go in and do head count, serving alcohol after hours and stuff like that. With this cannabis, we don't have that yet.
So to the best of my knowledge, I've never been in a smoke shop. That doesn't mean anything other than, is there any reason, I'm assuming any product that's sold in a smoke shop is not meant for anybody other than under the age of 18. Am I correct on that?
You're correct in saying that.
So is there any reason that a young person should be in a smoke shop?
No.
Okay. Do you expect additional, whether it's this property, I'm not asking for a specific, but do you think that with what your plan is for the department, do you think you'll be continually focused on these illegal cigarettes, people selling marijuana when they're not legal, and then flavored vapes?
Yeah. Learning what I did through this, I think a continued effort with the Q County Health Department in New York State would be the best way to go.
You're a dad of 2 young ladies in their 20s. We'll keep them both in the 20s of this. I just
First of all, appreciate that.
Recent birthday. Do you come at this from the perspective of just a law enforcement, or do you come at this as the perspective of a parent and now a grandparent?
It's the whole thing. It's law enforcement officer, parent, community is the best way for me to explain it. I grew up here. I said from the beginning, I want to take a vested interest in this community, and this is stuff that's bothering people. So I feel like I should go out and take care of these problems.
So 2 other items I want to talk about: body cameras and recruitment. We're not going to get to bail reform, I can tell you that already. But on body cameras, the city council just recently accepted a grant from the federal government.
We did.
For $120,000.
Correct.
And that has to be a local match on that, correct?
Yes.
So $240,000 will buy how many cameras?
We are getting 60 cameras and tasers. We did a bundle package.
Okay.
So it's going to be upwards of 600.
So you originally wanted to use 600,000. So you originally wanted to use some federal CARES money for that, but you found the money elsewhere?
Some of the money we found elsewhere, correct. Because we did the bundle package with the tasers, our taser lease was up, so we were doing new tasers anyways. So this made the most sense and saved a couple $100,000.
Taser lease. I don't think I've ever heard that phrase. Okay.
Yeah.
So why forget the tasers for a second. I get that part. Why do the body cameras?
The body cameras, once again, goes with transparency. We're realizing now that body cameras used as evidence in a testimony are going to help not only the DA's office, but our officers as far as getting guilty pleas and stuff like that. People,
No, go ahead. No.
People on the street are videotaping us as it is. Why not have our perspective of what happened?
So is this something that's driven by you, the department, the city, the state?
It's the time. It was brought up. We did the governor's executive order, and it came up a lot in the topic. And
So the community, what you're talking about was 2 years ago. There was a community policing. We did the forums. I think I moderated a couple of them. So that came up a lot during that time period. So, but you adopted as a department, I don't know if this was during your tenure as chief or Chief Butler, you came up with a community policing plan, and cameras are part of that, correct?
Yes.
So how do they work?
So
are they on all the time?
Nope, they'll go on, and we'll do that where we're actually, Deputy Chief Anthony is working on the policy and procedure part of it right now. When you're on a traffic stop, when you're on a call. So they also have sensors on them. When you turn your patrol lights on in the car, it activates the body camera. If you pull your gun out of your holster, it'll activate the body camera. Same thing with the taser.
Can you turn it off?
You can, because, but then you have to explain why your body camera is off.
I was going to get to that point.
Yeah,
there's a process
you
where...
You can, because they have to have a fail-safe in them. If you're in the restroom and an officer near you turns the lights on, you want to make sure you turn that off.
I did not think of that example, but thank you. So is there an annualized cost for these?
So this particular cost that I gave you was for 5 years.
Okay.
Tasers, body cams for 5 years.
And one of the criticisms of other departments that have come up who fought this has been you have to have additional staff. Will you have additional staff for this?
So we were asking for an additional officer because of discovery, the laws that we have to do now. Everything has to be turned over in a time-sensitive manner, and we just don't have the personnel to do that right now.
And how long will you keep the data?
It depends on the case. I mean, some data's got to be kept forever, homicides and stuff like that, and we'll turn everything over to the
You still got
DA.
all that evidence up in the attic up
we
there?
Do.
We do.
We do.
That is most likely going to be an archaeologist's fun position. So last 2 minutes, I want to talk about recruitment because I mentioned there are some incentives for officers to leave after 20 or 21 years. So how many officers, roughly, do you think retired in the last 18 months from the Auburn Police Department?
We had 10. There's 10 officers that just came out of academies. 4 on their own and 6 are on FTO. So within 20...
FTO means what?
Field training officer.
Okay.
So they're with a field training officer right now. So within that 2021 period, a minimum of 10. We lost 178 years of service through those officers.
And when you lost that, that's because there is an incentive for, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but there is an incentive for officers not to continue after 20 and 21 years because of the New York State retirement rules, correct?
Correct.
And that's why they often retire.
Yes.
So have you been able to fill all those vacancies?
We are currently 2 short. One started in the academy on the 28th. So
Okay.
which leaves us 2 people short.
And how long does it take for an academy?
Academies are 27 weeks long.
So it's almost half a year.
And then when they're done with that, they have 18 more weeks of field training.
So do you have an active civil service list that you can still reach people?
We just exhausted it. It
Okay.
lasted 4 months.
And so when can you offer your next exam?
We're only allowed to offer our exam once a year because of the size of our department. So every September.
So
we
you're
have to
still so what you have right now is what you will if for some reason you lose an officer, and you may lose in the case of Officer Morrissey, but you may lose somebody retires, somebody gets there 20 years, you will not be able to fill that vacancy at this stage other than laterals, correct? Have you done any laterals recently?
Not recently.
Okay.
Officer Howard was a lateral.
Okay.
So we do have a couple laterals that came in.
And that's somebody who's with a different department, and there are procedures to allow them to come work for you.
They have to meet certain New York State criteria.
And so what do you think the biggest challenge, because one of the challenges, your predecessor sat here and said one of the big, I think you sat here and talked about it. It's tough being a police officer right now.
It is. With all the different scrutinization you go through. It's just not that job. When we were growing up as kids, you wanted to be a fireman or a police officer.
Right.
You know, you heard a lot of people say that. You don't hear that a lot anymore.
You mentioned Officer Howard. She's a female. How many female officers do you have?
We have 10 female officers right now.
Which is the largest number that you've had ever.
Ever.
And how about minority representation?
We have a black male and a Hispanic male.
And so are these, when you go to the next test and you continue to recruit, because this is going to be an ongoing process, I'm assuming, are those categories you're still going to look to fill?
Yeah, we want the best candidates, and we target every race out there to get the best candidates that we can possibly get.
Chief, I want to thank you. You've gone a little bit over our 30 minutes, but we really appreciate it, especially during this time where you've got other matters on top of your list. But we appreciate you giving us an update, and we hope you'll come back in. Maybe we can talk about bail reform and other things changes that are going on in the department.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here, Guy.
Our guest has been Auburn Police Chief James Slayton. We want to thank him for joining us, especially right now. And we look forward to further updates on some of the matters that we've talked to him about, including nuisance property and illegal substances. We'll return in just a moment with Cuyahoga County Tourism Director Karen Kuhl to discuss the state of tourism in Cuyahoga County and the impact COVID has had on the local and regional industry. We'll be back with another edition of Inside Government on Thursday with new Cuyahoga County Veterans Affairs Director Kevin Swab to give us an update on the work of his office as well as his new job. And on Beyond the Front Page, we'll have the Schweinfurth Memorial Art Center's Executive Director Donna Lamb back in the studio to talk about the Art Center and, more importantly, how has the arts done during COVID. Over the next month, we'll have a full slate of programs that include our guests being Senator Pamela Helming, Assemblyman Brian McElow, Cuyahoga County Legislative Chair David Gould, Cuyahoga Community College President Brian Durant, Stephanie Hutchinson of the Auburn Housing Authority, and Melissa Kartner of the YMCA will be in to talk about summer camp. We're all looking forward to that. And we'll have the Auburn School Districts, Jeff Parazola and Lisa Green in to talk about Auburn's proposed budget that goes before voters in May. We'll also have our annual Auburn Large School District Forum on May 3rd. Before we go, though, we would like to let you know that you can send us your ideas for guests or questions to Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page. You can send them to cozguytho@aol.com or Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cuyahoga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. Stick around for a discussion on local tourism efforts, but otherwise, stay safe, get boosted, and be well.